3 missiles, 1 hit. The world held its breath. August 17th, 2025. The Pacific Ocean boiled with fire. Out of the night sky, 3 Chinese intercontinental ballistic missiles streaked at supersonic speed toward a U.S. carrier strike group. The USS Ronald Reagan's defenses managed to intercept 2, but the third punched through, tearing open its hull, killing 7 sailors, and hurling a fighter jet into the sea. The response was swift. Within hours, American bombers and submarines struck back, obliterating 3 of China's nuclear bases and erasing nearly 20% of its arsenal in a single night. But Beijing's reply was even more chilling. 20 ICBMs launched directly toward American cities. How did war escalate to this breaking point? Could this be the start of World War III? Join me to find out the truth. China's People's Liberation Army had swollen into the largest standing force on Earth. A $320 billion war chest fed its growth. New warships rolling off shipyards, hypersonic missiles screaming through test ranges, and the dreaded DF-41 intercontinental ballistic missile, each one a doomsday spear.
Missile experts are worried tonight about China's new missile capability. There's a new report indicating China could soon be able to deploy a nuclear-tipped missile that U.S. defenses would find much harder to detect.
Carrying multiple nuclear warheads, each one able to leap 7,500 miles and hammer every American city on the map. But this storm had been building for years. The South China Sea became its stage. American and Chinese warships circled reefs and jagged islets like predators in shallow water. Sometimes they passed within yards, steel scraping distance. Radar locks flickered on and off, a heartbeat away from firing. A single wrong move could have lit the fuse. And yet, every time, both sides pulled back. Barely. Conflict spilled into cyberspace. In May 2025, a digital barrage traced back to Chinese networks plunged 3.2 million Americans into darkness. The Midwest flickered out, cities swallowed by silence. Hospitals scrambled for generators. Airports shut down mid-flight. Ordinary families lit candles while glowing screens carried the message, China could strike inside America, without a single shot fired. Then, this happened. June 8th, 2025. Under a moonless sky, Chinese special forces launched a raid on Taiwan's Kinmen Island. They expected a quick, symbolic victory. Instead, they ran headlong into Taiwanese Marines, dug in, armed to the teeth, and quietly backed by covert U.S. advisors. The fight was brutal, short. 19 Chinese soldiers killed. Others dragged out alive, their captured gear and body cams paraded across global television before Beijing could even control the narrative. What was meant as humiliation for Taipei became humiliation for Beijing. The fury was immediate. State media howled for blood. Washington braced for escalation. Behind closed doors, generals issued their warning. The risk of nuclear confrontation is rising. A secret Pentagon memo leaked weeks later, its blunt words flashing across headlines like a thunderclap. By August, the world balanced on a knife edge. Carrier groups stalked each other in the Pacific. Submarines hunted in silence below. Missile batteries crept closer to striking distance. Diplomats still spoke, but their words were brittle, clipped, hollow. Every flyby, every sonar ping, every surfacing submarine carried the weight of a possible war.
It felt less like if and more like when.
On August 17th, the missiles rose. No one was surprised. The fire had only waited for its spark. At 2:13 a.m., the Pacific night cracked open. From deep inside China, 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles clawed into the sky, climbing at 15,000 miles per hour. Satellites caught them instantly. Pentagon screens lit up with crimson arcs. ICBM launch detected. Probable trajectory. Pacific theater. Estimated impact, 12 minutes. 12 minutes to decide the fate of a fleet. On the USS Ronald Reagan, alarms howled. Sailors spilled from bunks, some barefoot, some fumbling for boots, all of them sprinting toward battle stations. The carrier shook with urgency. In 12 minutes, they would either live or vanish into history. The bridge pulsed red. Captain William Marks barked orders above the chaos. Aegis online! THAAD batteries! Lock and fire! Hands flew. Switches slammed. Consoles screamed. Interceptors shot skyward, streaks of white fire cutting through the black like divine spears. One Chinese warhead obliterated at 180 miles altitude. Another destroyed at 70. Cheers erupted in the control room, ragged, desperate. For a heartbeat, hope surged. Maybe they had pulled off the impossible, but then, one slipped through. Radar shrieked. A streak of flame tore downward. No time left. A shockwave ripped through the Reagan. The steel giant groaned, her hull twisting as though wrenched by an invisible fist. Fire raced across the flight deck. An FA-18 Super Hornet, worth $70 million, was hurled into the ocean like a toy. Compartments ruptured below deck, seawater crashing in. 7 sailors never escaped, shadows swallowed by fire and flood. The living stumbled through smoke, coughing, choking, dragging the wounded through twisted steel, voices shredded with panic. "Get him out! Move!" Men clawed at jammed hatches. Blood and seawater mixed in the corridors. Survival was not guaranteed. But beyond the chaos of the carrier, war's machine was already turning. The Pentagon had rehearsed this nightmare. Retaliation was not improvised, it was primed. In bunkers from Guam to Washington, encrypted orders flared to life. Submarines shifted, bombers prepped. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, pilots strapped in. The president's voice came cold, stripped of hesitation. Execute. 3 Chinese nuclear bases, Inner Mongolia, Sichuan, Hubei, were locked in as targets. No debate. No delay. The Reagan burned, black smoke clawing upward, her crew fighting flames in rising seas, unaware of the larger truth. America's counterstrike was already screaming toward China, and it would be devastating. At 04:17 a.m., Guam's Andersen Air Force Base shook the earth awake. Twin B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted silently into the night, their black wings slicing the Pacific sky. In their bomb bays, 24 JSSM-ER cruise missiles, coordinates burned into their circuits. The order had come straight from the White House. Strike back. From beneath the South China Sea, USS Missouri, 300 feet under, breached war into motion. Dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles shot free, climbing, then arrowing toward hardened silos in Inner Mongolia and Gansu, homes of the DF-41 ICBMs. High above, MQ-9 Reaper drones, loosed from Okinawa and Diego Garcia, crossed into Chinese skies. Their wings glinted silver in moonlight. Each carried Hellfires and guided bombs, hunting radar posts, mobile launchers, command bunkers. By 04:40 a.m., the night over western China tore apart. Satellite feeds showed silos in Gansu erupting into fireballs, shockwaves rolling across the desert. 3 launch sites destroyed, a communications hub vaporized. 20% of China's first strike arsenal gone in minutes. Inside Beijing's underground bunker, silence curdled into rage. Generals stared at screens of smoking craters. Command relays flickered and died. PLA officers shouted over each other, panic rising.
"We are blind! Their electronic warfare has cut us off!"
But retreat was unthinkable. At 05:02 a.m., deep in Sichuan province, ignition flares roared. A forest of DF-41 ICBMs rose from silos, each carrying up to 10 warheads. The earth trembled. Valleys turned into a furnace. 20 missiles leapt into the stratosphere. Targets: Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Honolulu, Guam. In Colorado Springs, NORAD exploded into life. Massive screens lit with 20 red arcs clawing across the Pacific. Sirens wailed. Launch detection confirmed. Estimated impact: 31 minutes to Conus, 22 minutes to Hawaii. Inside the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Alvarez turned to the president. "This is it, sir. Their second strike is underway." Trump's voice cut like steel. "Get every interceptor in the sky. No hesitation." The next 20 minutes bled like eternity. At Fort Greely, Alaska, crews sprinted into frozen silos. Ground-based interceptors, GBIs, thundered into the sky. In the Pacific, destroyers USS John Finn, USS Barry, USS Shiloh lit their decks with flame, launching Aegis SM-3 interceptors toward the void. Over California, THAAD batteries locked in, their radars humming as they hunted death falling from space. At 05:16 a.m., the first intercept hit. A GBI collided with a DF-41 warhead at 15,000 bambularo, lighting the heavens like a second sunrise. NORAD roared, "One confirmed kill!" But 19 remained. At 05:20 a.m., another intercept shredded 3 warheads near Hawaii at 90 miles altitude. Yet one survived, tumbling, burning. Offshore from Honolulu, it detonated, a non-nuclear blast that shattered windows for miles and sent waves tearing through Waikiki. On the west coast, Los Angeles drowned in sirens. Millions fled freeways, crammed basements, prayed. For the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the city braced for annihilation. At 05:28 a.m., 7 warheads streaked toward California. THAAD interceptors ripped upward, 2 kills at 70 miles, another at 45, but 4 punched through. NORAD's deputy commander screamed across the floor, We've lost track of multiple re-entry vehicles. Repeat, multiple RVs splitting. The screen fractured into dozens of red tracks. By 05:31 a.m., minutes from impact, America's shield strained against the impossible. The question was no longer strategic, no longer political. Could America stop them all? The sky cracked before dawn. 05:42 a.m., Alaska. A ground-based mid-course defense interceptor roared out of Fort Greely, fire tearing across the black horizon. Seconds later, another volley thundered from Vandenberg. Inside NORAD, screens lit green. Target lock confirmed. 05:50 a.m., Pacific. Aegis destroyers joined the fight. From the deck of the USS John Finn, sailors watched streaks of light climb into the heavens. Warheads glowed like falling stars. Somewhere above the clouds, a battle raged, silent, invisible, lethal. Then, impact. One by one, the intruders vanished. 17 warheads torn apart in the void. Kinetic kills at 15,000 miles per hour. Tiny flashes marking victories no one below would ever see. But not all. 3 missiles slipped through. One veered off course, tumbling harmlessly into the ocean near Guam. Another detonated prematurely. A fireball etched against the Hawaiian sky, terrifying to see, too distant to kill. The last slammed into open waters east of Midway Atoll, throwing up a wall of water but sparing the islands. The world exhaled, and then came the price. The USS Ronald Reagan, already scarred from earlier strikes, caught a storm of falling debris from a failed intercept. Steel ripped. Fire rolled through decks. By sunrise, 23 sailors lay dead. Far away in Beijing's underground command center, silence fell heavy. Reports trickled in. 20% of the arsenal gone in America's first strike. The retaliatory launch shredded, their warheads broken in the dark. Screens showed shattered arcs of light where cities should have burned. Generals shouted. Fists slammed tables. But the truth was a blade in the room. China had gambled and lost the opening round. 06:15 a.m., Washington. The sitrep came in the situation room. Relief washed the room, but it was thin, fragile. The shield had held, barely. The war hadn't ended. It had only sharpened. On ships, on bases, in trenches of steel and concrete, soldiers carried the same weight. Radios crackled with cheers, with sobs, with prayers whispered into the static. Catastrophe had been stopped, for now. But as the sun rose over the Pacific, one question hung in the air like smoke. How many more dawns like this could the world endure? The guns fell silent, but the war had already changed the world. The failed Chinese strike and the brutal American counterpunch sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. By dawn, the halls of Brussels echoed with hurried footsteps. NATO had called an emergency session. Ambassadors summoned with no time to prepare. Defense ministers briefed in hushed tones. Reports flowed in. 3 nuclear warheads lost in the Pacific. Silos in Gansu burning. The USS Ronald Reagan scarred but afloat. Allies needed answers, and fast. Across Asia, old fears returned. In Tokyo, Japan's self-defense forces were placed on the highest alert since World War II. South Korea mobilized reserve brigades near the DMZ, fearing the conflict might spiral across borders. Australia, tied by treaty and geography, moved its warships into patrol formations, cutting through the South China Sea with radars sweeping. The region had been thrown onto a war footing in less than a single night. For ordinary people, the shock ran even deeper. In the United States, grocery shelves were stripped bare as civilians panic-bought water, batteries, and canned goods. In Shanghai and Beijing, families crowded into subway tunnels and underground malls, treating them as improvised bunkers. Social media carried the war faster than any missile. Grainy videos of fire tearing through Chinese silos spread alongside haunting images of the wounded Reagan. The face of one young sailor, barely 20, bloodied and wrapped in bandages, became a symbol of survival. The ship's losses told the darker half of the story. 23 sailors confirmed dead. Their names read aloud on board as crew members stood in formation, the Pacific wind snapping at their uniforms. Among them was Petty Officer Marcus Hall, who had manned the radar deck when the blast wave struck. He never made it out. His best friend, Seaman Tyler Grant, did, pulled from the wreckage with burns across his arms. "He saved me," Grant would later whisper, voice breaking. "He pushed me out before the fire took him." In the middle of high-tech war, the cost was still counted in lives, one by one. But beyond grief and fear came numbers that stunned even hardened officials. The USS Ronald Reagan alone, valued at more than $6 billion, had suffered hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. The destruction of 17 incoming ICBMs meant nearly $1 billion in interceptor missiles had been fired in less than half an hour. For China, the price was far steeper. 3 nuclear warheads, each costing upwards of $100 million, and multiple silos and launch facilities, worth billions, reduced to fire and ash. Economists quietly warned that the first night alone had burned through more than $25 billion in combined military hardware. And this was only the opening act. Both Washington and Beijing had tested the edge of Armageddon and stopped just short of the fall. Nuclear fire had almost remade the world in a single morning. Leaders on both sides knew it, even if they would never admit it publicly. As one NATO diplomat said behind closed doors, the world had glimpsed the abyss and stepped back only by accident. Yet even as relief spread, whispers grew darker. The strike had failed, yes. The silos had burned, the warheads had fallen short. But everyone knew China had more than missiles. And as the dust settled over the Pacific, intelligence briefings began to hint at something else, another weapon, waiting in the shadows. The war was far from over. The war had shown how fragile the world truly is. A single strike at sea took 23 lives and reduced a fighter jet worth millions to fire and debris. The retaliation that followed erased entire nuclear sites, shifting maps in seconds. And when Beijing's missiles streaked toward the Pacific, only luck and interception kept disaster from turning final. The danger was never gone, it was only delayed. Now both nations stand in a tense silence, their weapons poised, their people living in the shadow of what nearly was. This was not victory, it was survival, and the line between them grows thinner every day. If you want to follow how this war unfolds, subscribe to our channel to know more.